Did you know that 80 to 90% of people who lose weight end up gaining it back? 80 to 90% of people who lose weight end up gaining it back or gaining even more weight than they had before. Why is this? Can you imagine going into a gym, talking to a personal trainer, okay? And you speak with this personal trainer and you tell them about your situation and yeah, I'm here to lose weight. And they say, great, but just so you're aware, you have an 80 to 90% chance of gaining all that weight back. Isn't that obnoxious? So why is that? Why do people lose all the weight and end up gaining it back? Well, it's an identity issue at its core. You can lose all the weight you want, but if you still view yourself as a fat person at an unconscious level, then that gravity is going to pull you back to that baseline. Your self-concept will always pull you back in that way. There's a gravity to it. You can think of identity. You can think of these two different identities as planets. Two different planets, two different identities, right? And each planet has its own gravity. And there's this old identity, there's this familiar you that you know so well, and there's this new identity that you're going into. This is your vision, this is your goal. So with this old identity, this is where you're at. And this is where you reside. You reside in this atmosphere, and you reside in this gravitational pull. So if you venture out just a little bit from this planet, you always get pulled back to the ground, to this old identity, because this is the atmosphere you're in, right? And this is your habits, your routines, your thoughts, your beliefs, inner stories about who you are. This is your identity. This is your self-concept. This is how you view yourself at an unconscious level, okay? And this has a gravity to it. Now, this new identity also has a gravity to it. This is the person you're moving into. This is your goals. This is your vision, right? This is that new identity, these new thoughts, ideas, beliefs that you have about yourself and what you're capable of, how you view yourself at an unconscious level. And this has a gravity to it as well, okay? Now, what you need to do, the only thing you need to be concerned about is leaving this atmosphere and snapping into this atmosphere. So you need to pull yourself far enough away from this identity, pull yourself far enough away where you snap into the gravity of this identity. And this is what I've talked about in previous videos of the downward stream to the downstream swim to your goal. You can either swim upstream to your goal, which is difficult, it's hard, it's against your belief system, it's against your current identity and what you believe to be true about yourself. Or you can align your identity with your goal and you can swim downstream to your goal. That's the point where you pull out of this old identity far enough and you snap into this new one, this new gravity. And that's where you get pulled to those results, inevitably. When you snap into that new identity, the result becomes inevitable. Okay? So you can think of it like two planets there. If you go to lose the weight, but you still view yourself as a fat person, you get snapped back into that reality, into that identity, right? But if you persist long enough and you tell yourself, you condition yourself on this new identity, on these new beliefs, these new thoughts, these new inner stories that you have about yourself, and you snap into this new identity, this new person who is fit and strong and lean and skinny, that's where the result becomes inevitable. So this identity level is foundational. But the thing about identity is that this gets formed from childhood, right? this identity level of ours gets formed from childhood, and we don't really seem to question it after that. So when we go to change our identity in our adult years, it feels like a very foreign thing. It feels like a very new thing, a very uncertain thing. Okay? So in our adult years, we never question it, but it's unconsciously determining our results. If you want to lose the weight, but you still view yourself as a fat person, if this is the unconscious self-concept that you have of yourself, then you'll get pulled back to that reality and into the atmosphere with those familiar routines, habits, way of being, way of thinking. On the other hand, this also has a gravity to it, right? If you want to lose the weight, you still view yourself as a fat person, that identity level is going to take over. If you want to lose the weight and you train yourself on identifying with that skinny new version of you, that fit, lean, strong new version of you, that gravity is going to pull you towards your results over time. And that process takes a little bit of time. I felt this with myself, this tension, this dance between these two identities in 2021 when I moved to Spain. In 2021, I moved to Spain. I didn't know Spanish. I didn't know anybody there. I didn't know much about the country or the city that I was moving to, but I was moving there, and I was going there to teach English. So you can imagine, I lived in the United States my whole life. I lived in the United States my whole life. Okay? There's this old identity, and there's this new identity that I'm moving into. Literally, I was moving from the United States to Spain. Now there's this old identity, okay, and good or bad, it's not that. There's this old identity, this person living in the United States. I lived in the United States my whole, 23 years prior, okay? In the United States, I only spoke English. I only knew people from the United States, pretty much. There was this identity, right? Now, this identity had a gravity to it. So when I moved to Spain, my first 5-6 months in Spain, there was this tension between these two identities where I felt myself being pulled back into this old identity, even though I was building this new identity, this new life for myself in Spain. Now, this new identity that I was focused on moving towards, but the gravity was strong of that old one, right? This new identity that I was moving towards spoke Spanish. I saw myself speaking Spanish. I built this new life for myself in Spain. I created a new social circle for myself, new commitments, a new job, right? There was this new identity that I was moving into, and I just needed to persist long enough to where I snapped into the gravitational pull of this new person. Now, I had a very specific experience that I remember where I was standing in the classroom at my job in Spain after being there for 5 or 6 months. And I had this connecting point where I felt myself reach that breaking point, that snapping point where I snapped into the gravity of this new identity. And I was standing there in the classroom, and I was looking over these 5th grade kids that I was working with. Our English and Spanish was broken, right? I was looking over this 5th grade classroom with these kids, and I'm like, wow, look at all these things that I'm learning. I'm actually doing this thing. Like, I'm in Spain, I'm living here, I'm building this new life for myself, I'm learning Spanish, I'm meeting all these incredible people. And I felt the gravity of the old identity give way, and I felt myself snap into this new identity. And that was a very powerful moment for me. So this is how you can think about identity. If you're trying to lose the weight, but you still view yourself as a fat person, you get snapped back into that atmosphere. You want to focus on making the transition into that new identity by focusing on bringing that person, that new identity to now. Making this new identity more familiar than the old identity.